Hi, Jules. How are you? It's really good to see you.
Hi, Hugo. It's great to see you as well.
Thank you for joining me and Destino today. I invited you because I wanted to celebrate you, your work, your recognitions with the MacGuffin Awards for the Prop Master Union.
Thank you.
But before we get started on the craft that you've been doing on 90s shows and Frasier and Happy's Place, and we met on the show Will and Grace, I wanted to know what made you want to work in entertainment.
Thank you, Hugo, first of all, for having me. I am flattered and thrilled to be here. And I know you're very busy, and I know I'm very busy. And we've been very fortunate. And so thank you for asking me to be here. And I'm glad we have time to do this. Years and years ago, there was a TV show on, it was called Bewitched. And, um, and she would wiggle her nose, and these magical things would happen on screen. And as an 8-year old, I was fascinated, and I just wanted to do that for a job. And I did everything in my power to make that happen. I grew up in the Midwest, and I didn't have a I didn't have a golden path to Hollywood, but I just tried to keep the dream alive. But that's where it started with Samantha.
And how did you find out that being a prop master was a job in Hollywood? And did you have any mentors along the way?
Um, I, to be honest, when I first wanted to come to Hollywood, I wanted to do special effects. That's watching Samantha make these things appear and disappear, and things show up, or problems be solved um, with magic. I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. And then growing up and going to the movies and watching the movies and seeing the magic, I and watching people just be like in awe over what they were seeing on the screen, and trying to figure out how they did it, or and I was like, that's what I want. I wanted to be the keeper of the magic. And so honestly, props wasn't in my wheelhouse. It was special effects. And so when I landed in Hollywood, and I started searching for jobs in this business, it was in special effects. And my very first job in Hollywood was actually at a company called CST, which was Color Systems Technology. And so I forgive me, but I worked on colorizing movies. And so it was my first foray into special effects. But it opened a lot of doors, and I met a lot of people, and it actually, funneled me into the Carsey Werner family, and that's where I found out props was a thing, and so that's what happened.
And what was the first show or first project that you were able to come on board and join them as a property team, not even just a prop master, but
Right,
in the prop department?
right. So Carsey Werner, as you know, is a very famous multicam, especially producer of multicam projects. Back in the day, in the 80s and early 90s, all through the 90s, 2000s, even now. We just did the 90s show, and that was with Carsey Werner. Um, and so I started on Roseanne as a PA, and then 2.5 years into that as a PA, I had met some writers along the way, Chuck Lorre being one of them, Danny Jacobson being another, who created Mad About You. Um, and so Danny became my friend, and Danny created a show called, it was with, oh, now I'm blanking. He called a show called Davis Rules. And Carsey Werner was non-union back in the very beginning of those days, in the Roseanne and Different World, when they were shooting those shows. And he created a show called Davis Rules. And I had asked him if I could go over and be a prop person on that show. And so they made me a third. And back in those days as well, you not only did props, but you did set dressing as well. You kind of uh, straddled the line between dressing the sets during the early mornings and early and late evening, or after rehearsals. Then you'd move over, rehearse props during the day. Then when everybody went home, you'd continue to dress the set with the set dresser. Um, and so that was my first show. I was a third, um, and I worked with some great people on that. So yeah, that's where I got started.
And what was your biggest takeaway from your first show like that?
Um, I, I'm not certain. I was still convinced wanted to be in props. I loved it. I did like it, but it wasn't. It was as you know, set dressers work really hard. They're moving men. I mean, and so that was the thing I was doing, and I was like, I wanted to be more. I wanted it to be a little more magical than moving couches from wall to wall, which is a very important job, but it's not the nichey thing I wanted to do. So I still was continuing to look at special effects at that time. So the takeaway that from that though was, just like all of us when we get our first jobs in this business, you you really see what people do, and you really understand what their crafts are and what their specialties are. And as all of us and young people in this business, you kind of find your way through it. And so the takeaway for me on Davis Rules, especially in the very beginning, was I was still figuring out who I was and what I was supposed to do and what my skills were, and meeting the people I was supposed to meet to travel the path I was supposed to travel. So those first jobs and those first meetings are important for sure, because you don't know where they're going to lead you.
Yeah, and I mean for you, I'm really glad to hear this story because you got through your work ethic and really moving towards this goal. You've I've been able to work with you as our prop master on our shows, and I've been able to watch your craft and what you bring to the shows. And you've also been recognized with awards on shows like the '90s show because for you, it takes a lot of research and a lot of design work as well to make sure that you fit the period. What was it like for you to prepare for a show like that?
90s was actually one of my very favorite shows. The period of the 90s was significant for me. I was a young person, in my 30s when that happened, and I it was a good time. It was a good time in Point Place, Wisconsin. And Kitty, who we all love from the '70s show, and Red, they were great characters for me to pick up and carry through the '90s. And Kitty especially, I crafted her after my own mom. Um, my mom was a mom in the Midwest in the '90s, and she did all the cookouts and the pies and the baking and the vacuuming and figuring out a computer and dealing with wild teenagers coming and going at all hours. So it was the Kitty especially was a very fun character to create, and 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 um and have her, just have her character develop, with my direction, being my own mother. And I thought it was really successful, and other people must have thought it was successful as well, because we won the Prop Masters Guild Award for that show, for outstanding creativity on that show. And it was just a great palette to work out. It was fun. It was great fun.
And what is it like for you on day zero when you get the script and you're reading, for example, the that you're gonna have to get the old school Dorito bag look, or you
Yeah.
have to get the old soda cans. What goes through your mind of like getting this process going for the show?
Right. So '90s especially, um, it was really important to get the information from the producers and the writers on that show as early as possible. And I know it's not always possible. That's the case with any show, obviously, or ideally. 90s was especially tricky because things like that would come up. We'd have to have a Doritos bag, we'd have to have a Coke can. And those are things that we sort of remember. There's lots of things we don't remember, and you're like, oh my god, that's right, that was in the 90s. So I tried to preload my room and my kit with lots of stuff that we knew we would need, like Coke cans and Dorito bags, and certain remotes and certain phones and things that we knew would come up. But then there were other things that, you know somebody said, oh, Capri Sun was a thing back then. And I was like, what do you mean Capri Sun was a thing back then? So I would dive into the research, and we would have to go and find, what that looked like. And back then, it wasn't, it was real. Like, it started off with in a real aluminum pouch, and it started off with, certain things that weren't, dare I say, the cheap way things are made now. So, aluminum cans weren't aluminum; they were made out of tin, and so, you had to have that look. And so, you depend on the resources. History for Hire has had and has a great art department. Um, Obviously, guys like you're, graphic designers. I would depend on you guys and your team to come up with find these drawings and download these pieces of art that we would find a way to create. And if they were in the script, at least I had a little head start getting that created. It's when you had a soda can, and the director would say, oh, go ahead and open that, and I only had six, and it turns out, you do that take, 8 times. Well, if they open the can every time, that's a problem. So, we had to be really careful about how we designed things, made sure we had enough. Anyhow, it was always, the research was always fun, but it was always scary as well.
I would love to know how you build a relationship and this trust with companies so that they can have offer you product placement and help you out with actual props that exist.
Right. So product placement is really a big thing for me. I um, Much like the people who work at prop houses around town, and I consider them an extension of my crew. Obviously, there's things I cannot share with them, story points and scripts and things like that. I can give them a general overall sense of what is happening in the show, but I can't. It's not like I can send them script pages or anything. But I depend on them a great deal, in helping me prop a show like that. For example, on 90s, Campbell soup cans, tea bags, things like that coffee cans, they were different in the 90s than they were obviously today. So I couldn't just go to Walmart. Like, I would go to Walmart for Kitty on 90s, but I would never have gone to Walmart for Will and Grace. Grace would have never shopped at a place like Walmart, but Kitty would have. And so I depend on product placement as well to make sure that the brands that show up in these sets are something that the character would actually have purchased. And 90s adds another level of research where obviously it's a period show. But I depend a great deal on product placement. 90s, Happy's Place right now. I mean, that there's a lot of stuff that goes through there that they not only is the product needed, but the budget. It helps me with my budget as well. So it's all good stuff.
You did bring up the show Will and Grace. How are you able to compare a 90s show to a show that takes place in New York? It's high end and it's a show that people grew up watching. So, again, you have to make sure that you keep that respect to the original.
Oh, exactly. Um, I It was one of the best days of my life when I found out I got Will and Grace. Obviously, I met you. I met my friend Jim Landis, who you know. my friend Joe Jura, who's a whiz with video production. Will and Grace, and you're right, I was a fan of the original show as well. Same with 90s, I was a fan of the 70s show. And, there's a sense of you walk onto a set like that and you walk into the set and Glenda Ravello is our production designer who's brilliant and award winning as well. And you walk in there and you get this sense of nostalgia and you want to be successful. You want to carry on the success of the show that came before. And then Max and David, we became friendly right away, and they really trusted me, and it was great. And then Jim Landis, the greatest, assistant prop master on the planet, and he just didn't let one ball drop, and because it was pretty stressful to, carry on the legacy of a show like that, and I was proud to have been asked, and we did a successful run on the last remaining episodes of that series, and I would love to. I would obviously that show has become a hallmark of my career, and hopefully there's a couple more to add to that as well.
Yeah, one of my favorite episodes that we did together was the I Love Lucy tribute episode. And for me to be able to help your department, I had to research so much footage of I Love Lucy, specifically the Vita Vita Vegemin bottle. What was it like for you to prepare for that episode? Because we were highlighting iconic moments in I Love Lucy, and we had to match it to look exactly like it.
That again, talk about highlights. That was another highlight. That was one of the most fun episodes of any television show I'd ever done in my whole life. And yes, you were vital to our success on that episode. Jim Landis, vital to our success. We, as you know, we had storyboards. We did so much research, and then it was also black and white. So we had to, you had to sort of relearn, go back to art school and understand that when you create something in color, and then it's going to be, it's going to become black and white. You have to match all those hues and values of color, and that in itself was a little bit of a challenge. For example, the Vita Vita Vegemite commercial that we shot. There's a director sitting in the chair, and he's sitting in the director's chair while Lucy is up there, while Deb's up there showing off the product. And we had so many samples of fabric for the chair back, because when you're looking at the footage, the Lucy footage, it's a value of gray. Well, in real life, it's not gray. It was green or red or blue or brown, or it was some color. So we had all these swatches laid out, and I had my filter on my phone, and I would go over all these swatches of color till we found the right variation of gray, which turned out to be, the color I assume they used. But we had set stills, and we had pictures from old magazines, and Jim and I had, the room was pasted up with all sorts of research pictures from those episodes, and Lucy in that time. And we also, if you remember, had Lucy's daughter on the set during that show, and she was blown away by the effort that every single member of the crew, not only my department but every department, had put in to make that episode a success. And it was really flattering to have her stand there and tell us with tears in her eyes that she was proud of us. So that was nice.
Yeah, I do remember that. And for me, it was also, being able to show up on set and then feel like
Yeah.
I've gone through time. And it was, really exciting to see also like all of our friends that are on the show kind of be in their own element, everybody bringing their A game. Because, yeah, we definitely wanted to deliver on this special episode on every level. But what would you say makes up a great prop department? And who do you look for to join your team?
That's a good question. First, I just want to comment on the end of what you just said. You were right. Everybody brought their A game, and there were moments when Deb as Lucy. I know they all played Lucy at one point, and they all did a great job. Um, but when Deb played Lucy, and you know, just seeing her in the set, like you said, and when all those elements came together, and you stood back and you looked at it, and nobody missed a beat, and it was really magical. And I just cannot emphasize enough how. And Max had said this, and Jimmy Burrows had said it, who directed that episode. And he said, we had created lightning in a bottle, and he's right. And that doesn't happen all the time. And you and I, and a lot of our friends that we still work with today, were very fortunate to have been in that moment when, you know, Max and David and the cast and Jimmy captured lightning in a bottle. And it's really flattering to be on a team like that. And to continue to your next question, that's what we look for, right? I mean, we try to find the team that's gonna, swing the bat and, get the home run. And I feel like we have that. I feel like I have that with you on my team, and I feel like I have that with Glenda and Amy and lots of people. I've worked with Tara Stevenson and Greg Grande as a production designer, and these people are all so talented, and these producers, and I think they know they're very lucky to have them on their crews. And for me, when I'm looking for someone, it's funny. There was a time when I thought that I needed people who had sort of had the experience, to have sort of been through enough shows to know, what comes next, and this is what's going to happen, and this is what you should prepare for. And I'm finding that, and I with Jim as well, because he encouraged me to really look at some young people to bring in and start to mentor as he was getting ready to retire. And he encouraged me to do the same thing. He's like, look, you have a lot of talent. I have a lot of talent. Jim did. He's like, let's start passing some of this stuff off. And so my focus sort of shifted from finding the person who sort of has been through it all and knew what came next, to looking for the person who wanted to do props and wanted to be and was ready to be excited about the world that we create and the characters that we develop. And so when we were introduced to my crew member Kenny Carden, who you also know, he's the guy. I mean, like, he's funny and smart and talented, and he wants to learn, and he's eager, and he's excited, and he's just he doesn't go home. He just wants to stay and do the work, and I'm like, that's the guy I want now. That's the girl I want now. Those are the people that I want them to be excited, because I was excited, and I was excited when someone gave me a chance, and he's excited that I'm giving him a chance, and I think that's great. So I'm looking for young people.
Yeah, and I can really appreciate that, this coming from you and also from Jim. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for him and seeing, past my job that I had at the time.
Right.
He was the one that always pushed for me to collaborate with Melissa McCarthy. And at the time we were working on her movies. And he was always so excited that he would pull me and say, hey, before we haven't even started production on the movie, but I've read the script, and how about we start working on this? So we would get a way ahead of everybody, and then we would be able to show Melissa just sketches and stuff like that, and then get her excited about the project. But it wasn't until I had that introduction with
Right.
Jim Landis that I also felt like, hey, I could do this myself, and I really started to believe myself as an artist. So yeah, thank you to Jim for
Yes,
inspiring paying it forward.
I 100% agree with you. And Jim, not only is he super talented, but he has that gift of mentoring and ushering and leading and guiding, and he gave it to me too. He downloaded lots of information and skills to me that I use now, And I am very grateful for that, because that transition into doing the work, from doing the work to teaching the work, I think is super vital. And I am very happy to, you know, to be paying it forward as well. I mean, I'm not as successful as Jim, but I'm going to get myself there for sure.
I really enjoy our time that we currently have on Happy's Place. And I would love to know, how do you break down a new script? What things do you look for? And how do you know who to invite to help you create these props for the show?
Right. So again, getting scripts early, just like on a period show, on Happy's is just as vital. Um, we As soon as we break it down, obviously, the things that we can pull from the room, the things that we product placement, the things that have already been pre-established, we pull all those things. I look for There's a few moments on Happy's Place where we've had to reach into the past. Um, we had to we had to come up with a doll from Gabby's past when she was a little girl. And so we were shopping for dolls from the late 80s and into the 90s, early 90s, maybe even a little earlier. But, so I jump right on eBay and I start looking for these things. And of course, it's not just my decision. These images and thoughts and ideas have to go up to the fourth floor and third floor, apologies. And the writers take a look and they tell me what they think. And so my first plan of action on a Happy's Place script would be anything vintage or period that I need to get ahead of and get on. And that would include collaborating with you as a graphic designer, because there's also things that we have to create, um, going into the past, or we've done a show where we went into the future, and we have limitations on props that are current, like let's say for an Apple phone, they don't want us to predict what an Apple phone is going to look like in the future. So we can't do that. So we can't say, oh, this is what we think it's going to look like and call it an Apple phone. So you and I have to come up with, I know we came up with something on the iPad. And in this case, the iPad was a 2025 iPad, but the imagery on it had to go out into the future, and we couldn't call it something that, somebody who really exists. It's their intellectual property. So we can't just take it and say, well, this is what we think it's going to look like. So you were tasked with finding something that didn't exist, and you had to put these elements together into something that could have existed without stepping on intellectual properties that exist currently. So it's a tricky collaboration. And in that particular case, where we were out into the future, the writers thought that they wanted this image on the screen. And you came in my prop room and we talked with Joe Jura, who's the video guru, and the three of us decided that we should animate it. And the writers were like, no, we're not even going to see the screen. We're never going to see the screen. We're just going to see this image up there. Just put something up there. It doesn't matter. We'll shoot around it. And the three of us were like, I think you're going to see the screen. And so, which is always the case, we're always going to put a prop out because you're probably going to see it. And if you don't, you don't, but you're probably going to. So the three of us decided to animate it. And when we showed the writers and the producers and the director, Pam Fryman, she was like, I'm shooting that. That's brilliant. That's what I want to see. And we actually got an ISO. They shot the screen. They isolated the shot, and Hugo and Joe had created this, animated moving AI character, and she was a character in the show, and it was beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I always talk about with you when, the writers say, don't worry about it. It's not going to be on screen, but we can't play that game of like having them shoot around the phone. We have to make sure there's something there. And yeah,
Right.
like you said, It went really well, and we did get a close up, and it was a major part of the episode. That leads to my next question: how do you get the trust of the producers and the director and the cast to know that you're gonna deliver top level work?
So the cast is very important on this step, actually. And what's interesting is, so you have someone like Reba who's been in front of the camera a lot and for a lot of years, and then you have someone like Belissa's character, Isabella, who is somewhat new to the craft. She's done some things, obviously, but when I had to approach her, Belissa, regarding a prop from Isabella's childhood, and she was like, "Wait, what? You're asking me? Like, why would you ask me?" And I'm like, because you have you're a layer of Isabella is you, and so what do you think it would be? What colors? What shapes? What objects? What things are important to your childhood that would make this prop, this letter or this jewelry box or whatever we had, put in this craft that we had made for her. And she was flattered, and she was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're asking me." And I'm like, and I think that builds a trust with an actor. And then another thing that I tell Kenny, and I think it's important for me, we tell the story ourselves. We tell the story to ourselves. So, for example, you know, there'll be a moment. There's moments where Bobby might have a drink, and I had always said, I think it's important that when Bobby has a drink, like on her own, that if she's sitting quietly and reflecting, that she would drink the drink out of one of her dad's old whiskey glasses because it's nostalgic. And when I explained things like that to Reba, especially, she too, she's like, that's amazing that you go deep like that, that you think about, where this thing came from. Like, nothing's random. Everything sort of has a connection in the story. And we did a bit where Steve had a pen, and Kenny and I talked forever about why he has this pen. And we made up this story about, I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was a professor that had given it to him. I can't remember, but there's meaning. And even though those words aren't in the script that I'm reading, and the person watching doesn't necessarily hear the connection between Steve and the pen, we've come up with a backstory. And when the cast knows that we know why Steve has this pen, or why Bobby drinks out of this glass, or why Isabella, keeps her letters from her childhood in this craft box, it's because we know where those items came from. We know why they're important to the characters. And I think that creates a trust with the cast. I think those stories and those connections create um, um, a trust with the producers and the writers, because they're like, "Oh, that makes sense." And sometimes we get shut down, but lots of times they listen, especially on Happy's Place. Kevin and Julie, and Michael and Mindy, they're very, and Pam Fryman, they're very intuitive. They listen to what we have to say. They actually stop and they listen, and they reflect and they consider, and they may or may not have an answer right in that moment, but that's where the trust comes, is that they trust me to start. They trust me to have a story, have a backstory. Why did I do it this way? And that's where we go from. And tech, typically it's usually always successful. Um, and if it's not, I find out why, and I understand what their projection is or what their path is, and then I go down that path. But it's good. It's a good collaboration.
Yeah, one of my favorite things and things that get me excited about working with you is like evolving as an artist and finding new mediums. What came to mind is the custom knife that we made to Kala, and that was something
Yes.
that we used 3D printing for that. And that's something that for me, I hadn't collaborated with the Universal Studios 3D uh, group over there, and we were able to create this prop for the character, and it made it even more meaningful because, like you said, we added so many details to it to make it so personal, and it wasn't something that you just went out to shop for.
Right. And that was another thing. So my assistant Kenny, him, he had not, um, built a prop of that caliber. And that's something that I'm old school. I would have gone straight to Jim Landis and said, carve this, carve it, and we'll cast it, and we'll make we'll make it out of rubber. We'll make it out of, whatever we were going to make, because there was a stunt involved with that knife as well. So we needed variations of blades that would break, and handles, and the way the handle broke, and how did it break, and what part was left in the bar. So we were also collaborating with effects at that time. And as you said, the art department, the sign shop, the 3D guys up at Universal who work with Tom, and they're brilliant. And then the other problem with multicams is that the timing is very tiny. That knife in particular, I mean, how many times did it change for us? It changed for 3 days in a row, how, what was going to happen. And but yeah, we having the 3D printers at our fingertips like that, that's a special thing, because not every lot has that. Those artists aren't typically available, yeah, at your fingertips like that. And as we start to move through this business and out of some of these old practices and into these new practices, like having a sculptor sculpt that handle versus having a 3D printer print it, it's good and bad. And like you said, that handle changed so many times. We added detail. I think when we printed the first one, they were printed, both the same way. So we had to flip the design so the handle was different not different, but flipped on the other side. So it was a learning curve, but it was good. And they did it fast, and they were right there on the lot. So that was a gift for sure.
Yeah, for those who are interested in the prop department, what are the things that you recommend the most so that they can be successful like those with in your team and like you?
So much like I was telling my son this morning about driving, I'm like, some things just come with time. Some things you can't just be told and then do them, and you have to do them over and over and over and over and over again. And with me, I have my vendor list, goes back to decades, and some of those vendors aren't even on the list anymore. And some of the people who run those shops don't run the shops anymore. And but they're still valuable to our craft, because, like we just said, you're not always going to be able to find a 3D printer, and you do need to find someone who can sculpt a bobblehead on Will and Grace. And so you need to keep those sculptors and painters and seamstresses and people who can knit and crochet, and people who can, it's like they're people who can throw clay and create pottery. Um, all of the crafts that, that the world contains at some point will become valuable as a prop person. And so you might be out shopping, and you might um, you know be at a farmer's market, and you see a guy who makes wind chimes, and you're like, I'm going to take that guy's card, because I could need a wind chime. And sculptors especially, you know we even on 90s, and they had written in this thing, and then by Wednesday it became this big sculpture, and I was getting ready to send a truck to Big Bear to bring this, this chainsaw wood carving back down to LA, and we ended up doing something else. But it's like, all of these values, all of these skills that all of these people have, you sort of need to tuck them away into your subconscious, because there's going to come a time when you're going to need to pull out a skill that isn't that isn't a 2026 skill. It's not a social media thing. It's something that you have to actually find the guy who did the thing back in the day. And unfortunately, you know, me having done this for 35 years, I have a pretty big, file of a lot of those guys. And I'm going to try and pass those off to my people, but just be ready to research. Like you said, I didn't live in Wisconsin in the 90s, but I created a life in Wisconsin in the 90s here in LA. And so, you know, I had to research, what the Piggly Wiggly logo looked like. And, you have to be ready to read and research and talk to people and listen to people. That's another skill of a prop master is, and we get accused lots of times of vanishing, and just being caught up in a conversation with somebody and not paying attention, to what's happening currently. But I'm putting it in here, and it's going to be in there because I might need it someday. So just remember the conversations, keep an eye out, always be on the lookout, keep a sort of mental list of, the skills that you've seen happen because you may need them. So.
Yeah, I think it's really great to see, especially for the prop department, when they enter a new show. For example, with Frasier, you had to learn everything that had to do with Boston and the Frasier character, and also his son Freddie was a fireman, so you had to learn everything that had to do with firefighters. For me, for my personal experience, I know that I ended up going to firehouses to go, ask around and take pictures of the logos, and just because we want to make it as real as possible.
Right.
So how do you prepare for things that you sometimes know nothing about?
So I do the same thing you just did. Fortunately for Freddie, I had actually done a show, Two Guys, a Girl, in a Pizza Place, and one of our characters on that show was a firefighter. He was a firefighter in training. So I did have a little skill in the firefighter knowledge, but I have more than once visited a fire department. I do go visit places. I do go um, when we did that episode of Will and Grace where we created the candy conveyor belt for the Lucy episode, and Sean and Deb and those guys were moving the candies. I went down to the Seas Candy Factory in Culver City, and I in fact I visited a lot of Seas candy places, but I had seen what they did, and I had watched how they made it, and I was curious how it was packaged, and I wanted to know. And Glenda and Amy, they obviously do this sort of thing too. Because when we dress a set, what's in the background? What are the things stacked back there? Why are they there? What sorts of things are there? Because you don't you don't really identify them as something that you would identify. But if it's not there, it's missing. Something's missing. You can't put your finger on it, but you're like, oh, but then when it's there, your mind sort of fills in the rest. It's a skill for sure. But yes, in those particular instances, I learn a lot about lots of things. We on How I Met Your Father, we did some set. I can't remember exactly, but the kid had to play a trumpet or a French horn or something. And Pam had asked me, it's like, how does this go together? And I had to know how to put together a French horn. And I don't know what even a French horn looks like right now. I'd have to Google it myself. But I had to know how to do that because that's what the kid did. He took it apart and he took it apart, 50 times and put it back together. So, there you spend the time and you do the work and you do the research and I want my team to do that too. And we're pretty good about watching each other's backs though as well. So it's all good.
Yeah, there's definitely no room for I don't know or I'm not going to do that.
Right.
It's always a yes, and you have to have some sort of answer, or you're working on getting that answer. And I think that's part of being, always asked back to new shows and part of being on people's radar that you are top tier talent. What's an experience that changed your life?
Um, oh, an experience. There's, you know, life is full of little experiences that sort of, you know, take you from one thing to the next. I would say an experience. One of the big things that happened, actually, right around the COVID time frame. I had been on Will and Grace, and we had just wrapped that show, and it was a lovely experience. It was a wonderful experience, and I and then you're like, well, what's the next thing? And you don't know what it's going to be like, and then in between that time, COVID had come, and we had sort of shut down a little bit, and then the experience was my mom had gotten sick, and I had left LA to go be with her, and because that's where I was needed. That's where my skill and my talent and my heart needed to be, and the energy I was spending needed to be out of LA and with my family. And then I got a call from Susie Greenberg, who and she had asked us to do the pilot of Night Court over at Warner Brothers. And I had explained to her that I really wanted to be there and do the show, and I really wanted to do the pilot, and but that my mom needed me, and I, I couldn't leave, and I needed to stay. And as you know, and probably a lot of people in this business, when you get a phone call, it's hard to turn down work. You get a phone call, and they're like, "Come to work," and you're like, "I'm not going to come to work." But this was my mom, and obviously it was a different experience. And I don't know that everybody would have done the same thing, but I didn't take the show, and I told Susie I couldn't, and I needed to stay. And she was like, "Jules, you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. And you know what? I'm going to call you again. Don't worry about it. Stay where you need to be. Do the thing. Stay there. Stay as long as you need. She needs you. Don't worry about us." Um, and then obviously that show went to Jeremy Armstrong, who's an awesome prop master, and well deserved. And I'm glad he got it. And I'm glad it was successful for him. And it was successful for me too, because Susie did call me again, and I did work with her again, and 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 that just sort of really solidified for me that work is important, and work makes up a great deal of our self-esteem and who we are as people in this business. But so is your personal life, and so is your family life, and so are the things that are important besides work. Um, and Susie really was a giant in that moment, because she could have just moved right on past me, and she found a great prop master, uh, and she let me, be prideful, for my decision as well, and that was really big, and that was a big deal.
Yeah, it's something that I've cherished as well, because when I was younger, work really took over my life, and now working with a team with Glenda Ravello, she's very adamant about, hey, take care of your personal life,
Yeah,
family first. If you need to, be away for a day or two, like make sure you take the time, and the work is always going to be here. And if not, like you said, we could take care of it while you're gone. And it's something that I had to learn to be okay with, like you said, of being able to say, "Hey, I need that time just to
right.
take care of this for now." I also really love to hear the stories about how it's such a small world, the craft that we work in, that you and Jeremy started as PAs on Roseanne, and now
Yeah.
both of you are these great prop masters who I really appreciate Jeremy's friendship as well. But it just comes to show you that you just never know who you're working side by side with, and where we're going to end up, and to always be grateful and be nice to people.
Oh, those the things you just said, you know, um, reiterating the value of family and your friends and your life at home, and those things are valuable. We know prop masters who have we've lost over the years, um, and they were very dedicated to their crafts, and the industry missed them a lot when they were gone, when they left us, and their families missed them too. And when they're gone, and you realize, that you spend a lot of time at work, and the you know this craft is very important. And like I said, it's woven into the fabric of who we are, and our self-esteem is so tied to our positions in this business. And but you really do need to, and as Susie allowed me to do, really just value your time at home as well. And I when I was younger, I didn't I didn't always I didn't always get home for Christmas, and I didn't always make it home for a ball game or a Christmas pageant, or and I you know and I felt guilty about those things, but I still stayed at work. And then you're given this chance to spend the time with the people you love, and someone says to you, like Glenda said to you, stay home, take care of yourself, do what you have to do there, because that's important. And I think it's important that we continue to tell people that, because it is important. And I always tell my crew, family first, like, that's very important. And it was always important to me, but I can tell you that it fluctuated between being number one and number two, and I'm not proud of that. And in that moment when Susie gave me that opportunity to let number one be number one, that was really a moment that sort of shifted my reality. And same with Jim Landis, like I was saying. And when he said to me, you need to start like letting young people in and teaching them what to do. And I had always done that, just sort of obliviously on my, in my, sort of in my radar, but it was never a focus. And Jim said, this needs to be a focus. And the last 3, 4, 5 years, it has been. And it's amazing how, how it feels to take care of your family, take care of the people on your team, leave a legacy, do the right thing, be kind, um, be generous, listen to people. Those are all things. My room can sometimes be like a psych office. People come in and are like, I just want to vent, and I'm like, great, it's good, because we spend a lot of time together, and I love a lot of people, and I feel very loved, and I think that's winning. I think that's winning.
For those people that are interested in the prop department, what would you say is the best way to network and meet the right people?
That's always a tricky one, because I'm in a union, and it's hard, especially now, to break into the union. There's ways, obviously. There's the what is it, the CRT? What is it, the program where we just had an intern come and visit. It was actually a year ago now, but that was great. She had gone through some coursework, and then she spent a few months on our stage with set deck and props, which is a great way to do it. So there's that. I know George Clooney has a school and a program where he puts young kids through the program. I think a few colleges have mentor programs. As far as networking, though, you know, there's commercials, there's the verticals that are out there, which I personally don't have a strong connection to. I know people who work on commercials, and I know people who work on verticals, but I don't have an in. But it's tricky. I just don't give up hope. Just keep talking, keep asking, keep inquiring, keep showing up, keep calling me, keep texting me and asking me if I have a position or if I have something that I've got going on, because you never know. You never know when you're in the right place at the right time, and the vertical becomes a union show, or the commercial becomes a union show, or just keep talking, keep asking, don't give up, and just keep trying. That's my best advice.
Yeah, I also like to bring up visiting the prop houses like ISS,
Yeah,
and they have like a huge variety, like you said, of things to look at, things to research. I also let people know that, visiting Warner Brothers and the Universal Studios lot is also an option of giving them a call and letting them know, you're either coming to research or you're a potential client, and they're more than happy to show you the facilities. And you never know what opportunity you might get just from
right.
showing up on the lot, as well as things like this, like asking people to do a Zoom call or coffee, just not to get a job out of it, but just to see what you can learn from this person that has been doing it for so long.
Absolutely right. And there's lots of smaller projects that come through. There's lots of charitable events that come through. I know for me, my son and I do a lot of volunteer work. We one of the organizations that we spend a lot of time with is Scouting America, and they do a lot of live events and a lot of events, recruiting events that are very creative. And I turn parents into set dressers and prop guys and special effects people all the time. And you never know whose mom is a producer. You never know whose dad is a set designer. You never know whose uncle is a DP, and that they're working on this thing. And you show up, and and you're this person who is this volunteer on this thing, and you create this magical space, and somebody's gonna remember that. For example, I just did, well, not just did, it was back in 2021. We had created this. We had created the Harry Potter grand dining hall in this huge lodge in the Palisades, and people walk through, with all this food and the platters on the table and the hanging lights, the hanging candles coming down from the ceiling, and people were blown away. They were like, "How in the world?" And I had just taken sort of this, this group of moms and dads and various kids of different ages, and I'm like, "This is what we're going to do," and led this crew. And about a month after that event had taken place, I got this random phone call, and it was a woman. She was calling from, I think it was Cal Arts, maybe, and was asking about a young person that was on my crew he was at Valley College, I think, at the time, and he really wanted to be in props and set dressing. And she was like, "We have a theater opening at Cal Arts, and this person applied, and they put you down as a reference." And I couldn't talk more, about this guy. I was like, "Oh my God, you would be so lucky to have this person, and they're so talented, and they're so dedicated, and so I talked this person up. They landed the job up there. So it's not in Hollywood, but you know what? And this person loved it, and they were so excited to be a part of it. And you just never know. You never know where it's going to go, or who's going to call. So it's good.
Well, lastly, I'd like to know, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh my gosh, this is always a scary question. Personally, would say I would tell younger Jules that uh, I'm I'm good enough. I'm good. I'm You're good enough. You are talented. You deserve it. You deserve the success. You're a good person. Because I'm always, and I don't know why, but I always feel like, I didn't deserve to get Will and Grace. I didn't deserve to get the Ellen show. I didn't, I don't deserve to have Reba right now, and I'm like, but I do. I've been doing this show I've been doing this business or this craft for a really long time. And there are people out there, there's people out there who you just don't jive with and get along with, and you can't let them get to you, and you can't let them, let their sourness on maybe their own non successes rub off on you. You need to find the energy that that you feel gives you the power and and tells you that you are good enough and you are deserving and you are successful and you do deserve the credit and you should take the compliment. And that would be my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I can resonate with that as far as reminding myself that if we were not talented enough to be on these shows, they would not be calling us anymore.
Yes.
Because people like the Glenda Robellos and the John Schaffners and Steve Olsons, they do not wait for you to get better to join their team. You have to be able to, be top tier to be on those teams. And yeah, just every time we book a new show, I remind myself that, the quality of work that we deliver to these producers, to these shows, and that's why we get called to work.
Absolutely correct. That is 100%. And it's hard to let that sink in through your skull, but it's true. And maybe it's just the way we were raised. You're humble and you're like, oh shucks, but you're right. All the people I could name, the Kelly Lees and the Susie Greenbergs and the Franco Barrios and the Steve Sandovals, the producers that are calling right now,
Yeah.
they know the talent that exists out there. And when they call you, they're looking for the best. And it's flattering when they call, and you deserve to be called. So it's good. It's a good thing. It's great.
Well, thank you, Jules. I really appreciate the conversation, and I look forward to collaborating with you more. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, Hugo. I am flattered and honored that you asked me to do this with you. And I think this is very successful, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So thank you for asking.